What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitman, folks. My name is Stephen, host of the show. We got Jared Madden in the studio, and this is the second time appearing on the podcast. We'll get to him in just a moment, folks. But if you want to support the show, you want to support the work that I do here at the Biblical Hitman, just head on over to patreon.com/The Biblical Hitman, and you can get all of your ad-free and community chats over there. Also, come support the channel over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, like the show, and share it with your friends. And also come support the channel over on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Spreaker. But any will do. And while you're there, if you like the show, you had a good time, just drop a review, a nice one, and hit that follow button, hit that notification bell. But with all that aside, Jared, man, welcome back.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate you kind of granting me a second episode. And we had a really good, I think, and fruitful conversation the first time, but I'm eager to cover a lot of stuff today that we didn't get into. So again, I'm super grateful for the opportunity to be back here.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. Well, there was good feedback on the last episode we did. Obviously, some topics that are touched on can be iffy, but it's stuff that we have to lay out on the table, right? There's a lot of what's going on pertains to all this kind of stuff. So, real quick, man, where can the audience support you, find your work, do all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, and is my
your screen sharing, you're locked in.
I have a couple about that, so I'll go ahead and throw those up now. So yeah, if anybody's interested in reading more and kind of digging in deep and seeing like what sources I drew from with my research, I have a series called Exposing Zionism. That's kind of my little title for it, but it's 2 books. It wasn't originally intended to be a series. It was originally going to be 1 book, which was The Idolatry of Christian Zionism. And then due to kind of current events, additional research that I did, really just kind of the way that things have been shaking out in the world, I said, you know what, I think it would be more than appropriate to write a second one. They're both very short. So I've got the 2. I've got The Idolatry of Christian Zionism, and then the quote unquote sequel, which is Hijacked by Zionism. Really, as a whole, I would say the 2 kind of read as mostly like one unified work. They're both very short, so they're meant to be digestible, and they're meant to really kind of give people a crash course on the topic, synthesize a lot of information, and then kind of give them a jumping off point for, further research of their own. And with those, I have them priced pretty cheaply. I'm not trying to, make a killing on these. I mostly just want to get the word out there. So each one is, if you have Kindle Unlimited, actually, you can just read them for free. If you want to buy like a digital download of it, they're each $1, and then the paperback for each is $7 if you want to be bougie and order the paperback. So I try to keep it affordable and mostly just want to get the word out there. If people buy a copy, pass it around, give it to a library, whatever they want to do or can do. I'm happy. I just want to spread the word about all this. And a lot of what I'm researching is actually, it's come into popular culture a lot, and in a big way. And obviously with current events, Israel is often on people's minds, on people's lips, but people are kind of, in what I've noticed, people are digging into the spiritual aspects and really kind of reevaluating a lot of the history and kind of connecting some dots, much as I've done. So I hear people on different podcasts and read different articles and blogs where people are hitting on a lot of things that I've hit on, and I'm like, yes, good. So a lot of people are, I think, equally woke up. I think what I just kind of do uniquely is sort of synthesize all that information into, a digestible package and kind of organize it, because it's a lot and there's a lot of threads. And it's not to say that I've discovered everything and hit on everything, but I feel like I do a pretty good job of kind of pulling it all together. So.
Right on. So what do we get into today, man? I know it's part 2. So
if you don't mind, I want to back up and just like real quick, like kind of recap for anybody who missed the first video. Cause I think if people go back, it was the one that was posted on May 16th on YouTube. If people missed the first video, I think it's really kind of essential before we get into this one. I'm not going to do a lot of, I remember there was one comment on the first video and somebody said, man, he's like tiptoeing around a lot about the Jews and Israel and making sure not to offend. And really what I was doing, and I in retrospect, I looked and I was like, man, I was kind of going over that a lot, but I think it was essential though, because I think it's important to really draw that distinction. And when you're talking about Israel, you're not talking about all Jewish people. But anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that today, because they can go back. So that was one of the topics. we most importantly, one of the things that we covered, if they missed it, is the scriptural basis, right, for the idea of the church being the Israel of God, the idea that political support for modern Israel is essentially optional. It's not a spiritual mandate to support this political entity. And there's a lot, we got into a lot of scripture that talks about why. And I think that it's going to be important to keep that in mind today because really, I think we as Christians and as Americans can make an informed individual choice about whether or not we support the modern nation of Israel. And I think when we look at a lot of the history and a lot of the current events and things going on, for many of us, the choice has been made that we do not support the nation of Israel. And I'm going to talk about why, and people can make up their own mind on how they feel. But the idea is that that's not to say that the Jewish people are condemned or that we are anti-Semitic or whatever. So just want to throw that out there. And then one of the other things we talked about the idea of idolatry, how Christians idolize, many Christians, Christian Zionists kind of idolize effectively modern Israel. We talked about the analogy of the golden calf and why I think that's applicable. And you taught me kind of a aspect of it having to do with Shekinah and the Wailing Wall that I had never really considered before. And so that was fascinating. We talked about the legend of the golem. I think that ended up, oddly enough, maybe the least relevant thing, but I think it I think it kind of, in some ways though, it's very relevant with like artificial intelligence.
Oh
But
yeah.
as far as though like political Israel, but to me that was like the highlight of the episode. I think that was I don't know. I thought that was fun to get into that with you. And then we also talked about the identity of the Antichrist, how I theorize that the Antichrist is going to actually not be a Muslim, not be an Eastern European or anything else, but is probably going to be an Israeli Jew. And I explain why in that. So anyways, if anybody missed all that, I really think they should probably go back and watch that. And then, kind of check this one out again.
Sweet. Hey,
Yeah.
you're good. Real quick, let me
Yeah.
just go check what's going on out in the living room.
Okay.
So I'm on a new piece of property here. I'm in my
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
house and stuff, and my dogs are going nuts right now. So just give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Absolutely.
What? That's hilarious. They're
Yeah.
my youngest dog, Goose, he's way more electric than the first one, and he's barking at the cows. That's what he's doing.
He's
Silly
barking
dog.
at the cows.
Yeah, so I have cows in the backyard and stuff,
Oh,
so
sweet. Are they your cows or are they like a
they're
neighbor's
my
cows?
neighbor's cows, but I
Okay.
lease the land to them, so we have a
Got it.
little contract with all that, man. Okay, before we got interrupted, man, where are we at?
Yeah. Well, so I kind of did my little recap spiel. I assume you're gonna
Recap
kind of
of part
I
1
assume you're
and
gonna kind of slice this a little bit, slice it in the
gotcha.
editing room.
Okay.
But if should I just kind of talk like we're picking right back up
Yeah,
again?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, sweet.
So you got into, all of that stuff in part 1, but
Yeah.
with today's show, I know you wanted to kinda get into Darby and all of that, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the first thing to get into, but I'm excited to hear about
Yes. So
that
basically
information.
what I want to do today is really kind of present a picture because I think we talked about pretty well like what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be Israel, the Bible, the verses that pertain to Israel and the church. And so we've gone, in my view, so far astray of all that. A lot of, the majority of American Christians really have, especially, evangelical Christians have kind of embraced this philosophy of Christian Zionism, and they've made it not only spiritual, but they've made it very political as well. And so, like, where did that come from? So that's what and that's, I think, the meat of it. Like, so how did we get from what the Bible actually says, as we covered before, to like, who kind of like brought this Christian Zionist angle to the masses, and how did so many people adopt that, and what were the other sort of darker agendas behind it, right? Like who was funding it? What's the connection to Kabbalah? How is it if we follow this idea through to its logical conclusion, which involves things like Greater Israel, the Third Temple? How is that all going to play out? What would that mean? What are the implications for us as Christians if we support it? So that's the kind of stuff I really want to dig into, and in a certain sense kind of sound the alarm, I guess you could say. And I think one of many, like I said, who's sounding the alarm about some of these issues, but I think I'm going to bring to the table maybe some tidbits of information and some angles on it that a lot of people just don't know about or hadn't really connected the dots on before. So and then just real quick, I have a video I'm kind of advertising here. I started a Rumble channel. I've only got the one video so far because I just posted it the other day, but it's called Zionism and the American Christian, and you can see. That's the title of it. And you can see, my handle up there, but it's on Rumble. And I kind of joke on the slide. I say, if you need to wake up a Zionist boomer, you can share this. And the reason I say that, and no disrespect to the boomer generation, right? But that's a lot of the Christian Zionists are kind of the previous generation. They still have a lot of influence and a lot of power, but a lot of the younger Christians are kind of waking up and saying, I'm not sure I want to keep going in that direction with regards to political Israel. But if you have, a parent, a grandparent, a pastor, someone who's kind of hanging on to that and maybe trying to beat you over the head with Christian Zionism, you can respectfully maybe send that video. I think it'd be a good resource. It's a lecture, and I prefer a long form conversation like what we're doing today over a lecture myself. I think it's kind of more enriching and you get different perspectives. But if you want to send something where somebody can get like a relatively quick, comprehensive crash course on the topics, going into really all aspects of it, the presentation, it's essentially a narrated PowerPoint video, but the presentation that I produced, I think, is pretty good for that. And I try to keep it respectful, keep it academic. And I think that, like, if a lot of people are on the fence or they're Zionists, but they're reasonable people and they just kind of want to know the truth, I think if you send that to them, it could maybe help. So anyways, I wanted to just kind of throw that out there.
Right on, man. Right on. Okay. So I can't wait to get to that the main meat and potatoes of it with,
Yeah.
Darby and all this kind of stuff. Where
Oh,
do we begin here?
Well, so I want everybody to kind of have three pressing questions in mind as we begin, and then I think Darby's the next slide after this. So
Nice.
the questions that I came up with, number one, why, and especially in light of what we looked at last week about what the Bible actually says, right? Why were so many Christians taught that we are spiritually obligated to support Israel, quote unquote, no matter what, right? Like, where did that come from? What is motivating the atrocious and violent behavior that we currently see on the part of the Israeli government today? Where did that sense of entitlement and immorality come from? And if anybody hasn't been following current events and they're like, well, what are they doing that's so atrocious and violent? Well, don't worry, I'll give you my take on that and provide a lot of information on that. And then finally, how did Israel, a very small country with few natural resources, not technically, I was kind of almost shocked to find this out. On paper, not technically our military ally. We don't have a formal military alliance with them at the moment. There's legislation being proposed in Congress currently by some Zionistic members of Congress, funded by AIPAC, of course, who are trying to pretty much literally combine the United States military with the IDF, at least in effect. And so that's alarming to me, obviously. But bottom line, my third question is, how did this tiny little country that really on paper like does not seem to actually do much for us as a country, how did they capture so much of our allegiance and also our resources? And I'll go into detail about how many resources we've sent their way. And what role did, of all things, Kabbalah occultism play in that? Because I think it actually does play a part in that influence. So those are some of the things I really want to dig into today. So the rise of dispensationalism. And so this is where we get into the Darby and the Schofield of it all. All right, so we've got dispensationalism is a theology that was invented in the 19th century, right, and spread basically, in my view, through intentional propaganda. I think that the spread of this theological theory that was previously unheard of in the church was accelerated because it had a lot of financial, political, and social backing, and we'll talk about that. But I think it was kind of artificially inflated and brought onto the consciousness of Christians in the West in a way that it would not have naturally progressed in its origin if it hadn't been sort of used by some of the power players as a tool, essentially, to influence people. So the dispensationalist system, and I don't even really want to go into the 7 dispensations because it's, in my view, kind of not only convoluted but basically nonsensical. They're arbitrary divisions of human history that are mapped onto biblical events, but when you look at them, you could really put certain events in multiple categories or mix the order up of them. It's weird, but if anybody wants to look, that's all readily available. Dispensationalism. But basically, it divides human history into 7 quote unquote dispensations or eras. And in those eras, it was thought that God had different means of interacting with humanity and even different criteria for what humans would have to do to obtain salvation, right? Whereas the kind of default alternative to dispensationalism, which did not even have a name until dispensationalism came along, it's kind of like how we have transgenderism kind of came onto the scene, and then people had to come up with sort of a term for the default, which is essentially normal. I don't want to be mean, but basically what was just considered to be like normal, it suddenly became cisgender, right? All of a sudden there's a term for it. But essentially, that's kind of like what happened with dispensationalism. Once dispensationalism was invented, people said, oh, well, we have to call ourselves something, in contrast to that. And so covenant theology or fulfillment theology are the terms that are typically used to kind of describe the default alternative to dispensationalism. And really what, covenant theology entails is just this idea that there's one covenant. It's a covenant of grace. It's God providing salvation through Jesus Christ. That is how you obtain salvation. You repent of your sins. You trust in him that he took the punishment for your sins. And that's how you get to heaven, right? And essentially, the idea with that is that those who lived before Christ, who were in covenant with God and who had faith, were looking to the coming Messiah and were kind of retroactively covered by the blood of the Lamb because of their faith. And those who, lived during the time of Christ or who lived to our time and into the future, we look back at what Christ did for us. We accept him as our savior, and that's how we obtain the salvation, right? So that was kind of just basic Christianity, and nobody really argued with it. But then and dispensationalists would say, well, yes, we acknowledge Christ as Messiah, and Christ is how you get salvation, at least in our era, the quote unquote dispensational era. But then they have these other, time periods that they identify where they think people approached God differently, and there were different mechanisms of salvation. And then there was the dispensation of the law with the Jews, and then that went away in favor of the dispensation of grace. But then the law is going to come back for the Jews in the future, and national Israel is going to be under the law once again, and you're going to have the third temple. So it's all like really bizarre, honestly, and convoluted, and it was not mainstream Christianity for 1800 years. So I just can't stress that enough. And as you can see on the right, there's a chart that, just looking at and you probably can't see it well, but just looking at the crazy chart, that's like how complicated and convoluted it is. And they have to have all these notes to explain, how everything matches up and why it's justified. And it's kind of over the top. I also would like to point out, though, that dispensationalism is the origin of both Christian Zionism. If there was no dispensationalism, there would be no Christian Zionism. I can say that very definitively because even when dispensationalism was formulated, there was no national Israel at that time. And then people kind of used the dispensationalist theology to say, well, in order for the end times to happen, according to our understanding based on this framework, there will have to be a national Israel once again. And then there were other people who adhered to the Zionist agenda, right, of reestablishing a national Israel for motivations of their own. And so they kind of were able to take dispensationalist theology and say, ooh, there's a Christian theology that could reinforce what we want to do and get Christian support in Britain and in the United States primarily. And so we are going to use that as a tool in my view, that's what happened. We were going to use this as a tool to basically kind of psychologically get those people on board with our agenda and sort of be our biggest cheerleaders. And we can see today, American evangelical Christians are like the biggest supporters of Israel, globally. And that's why. It's a direct result of dispensationalism kind of being used to cultivate that. All right. And then also just kind of as it's not, 100% relevant to our topic, but just kind of as a side note, rapture theology, pre-tribulation rapture theology also comes out of dispensationalism. That was not a mainstream Christian belief either. prior to the 19th century. So,
Does this
um,
have like a church age in it?
yeah,
Is it dispensation? So whenever you hear church age, does this come from dispensationalism?
dispensationalism, yes. And the idea, they even call the church age, quote, a parenthetical age. And what they mean by that is that there was the dispensation of the law where national Israel were the people of God, and they believe still are the people of God. That's the key. Dispensationalism splits the people of God. Instead of one body, as the Bible says, under Christ, they've got two bodies. They've got essentially parallel destinies for Israel and for the church, but both are equally covenantal people of God, in the dispensationalist worldview. But they call the church age a parenthetical age because essentially there's the dispensation of the law, and then that is put on pause, and then you have the church age, right, where salvation is obtained through Jesus Christ, not through adherence to the law. But then the idea is that the church will be raptured away. Once the church is removed, there will be a return to the dispensation of the law involving national Israel. They will reestablish um, this system, right, and they will have their third temple once again and all that. And then Jesus Christ will return, and they will accept him, and he will kind of preside over all that. Like, he will basically, and they do believe in an antichrist, and I think they believe that the antichrist will also come in sort of in the intermediate and um desecrate the third temple. But the dispensationalist view, at least the hardcore dispensationalist view, is that the law can actually be once again salvific for the Jews if they follow the Mosaic law, and that once they have a third temple and they do that, ultimately Christ will come and they will accept him, but he basically is going to be the high priest over that old system and kind of rule as like almost the king of national Israel, over the Jews. Whereas, like, we believe he will return and rule as well, but we believe he's returning to be, um, the king because he's the king over humanity. He'll be the king over the earth, right? His millennial reign. And we, the church, are the Israel of God. We are the people of God. If you believe in covenant theology, that's what you believe. So there's one people. It's Gentile and Jewish believers, but there's not two like simultaneous and parallel alternate peoples of God that are going to later be united. There's only one people of God that are proceeding down a straight path, and that's the church, which is both Jews and Gentiles. Um, and every dispensationalist is going to explain kind of to you slightly differently how how the two tracks are even these two tracks that supposedly exist, right? The two parallel tracks of God, like how they're even going to come back together and like what role the law is even supposed to play. But if you go with what the Bible actually says, which is that the old covenant was abolished in favor of the new covenant, and that all you have to do and all you can do to obtain salvation is to put your trust in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, then all that stuff really is not relevant. And the only way that it really can come back in is as a counterfeit, right? As like if the um, third temple is established and the religious Jews are performing animal sacrifices there, um, that basically is just continuing to reject Christ and try to use that to atone for their sins. So it's not something, if you really are a true Christian and you believe in covenant theology, there's no way that, you can get on board with that agenda. You're just encouraging people to remain in the darkness, essentially.
Gotcha. I see Schofield's on here.
Yeah. So I wanted to point out with Darby. Darby's in the middle, and so he's the guy with the black background, and I've got the Masonic occult symbols next to him. And so he's he was a very cantankerous character. He started the Plymouth Brethren denomination, and then it split off, and he led a sect of it that was called the Exclusive Brethren, which today is basically a small cult. And it continues on today. But really, I think most alarmingly, he was very obviously, from his writings, there were numerous examples of him employing occult terminology. So, for instance, he would talk about multiple times. He would talk about the secret wisdom of God, which is a term that's lifted directly from the Kabbalah, and he would talk about God as, quote, the architect, which is a Freemason way to refer to the higher power. And also, it should be noted, most Masonic rites actually have a basis in Kabbalah, especially the ones that are kind of considered the highest level. and I'm not an expert on Freemasonry, but from what I have read, there are some that are very involved and that are very occultic, explicitly occultic in nature, involving actually doing, magic, essentially incantations and things, and those come direct out of Kabbalah. And you can see there the symbol that's highlighted there is a nice little star of David, or you could call it the Seal of Solomon or the Star of Remphan, and that's one of the common Masonic symbols. It's there they have the eye in the middle, but it's the same symbol, and you can see it there. So I just kind of wanted to throw
Yeah,
that
it's
out
an
there.
alchemical symbol too, like because it has the
Yeah,
upside up triangle going up, triangle going down, male and
yeah,
female energies, and
yeah,
also the four elements of life are pretty much four different triangles, but if you blend
yeah.
them together, it makes the same symbol.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because with Kabbalah, they actually believe in this like divine feminine side of God, and
That's the wisdom. So whenever they say wisdom, they're actually referring to the
yeah,
goddess.
to that
In my, I
divine.
mean,
And I know like Leonard Nimoy from Star Trek, who played Mr. Spock. He was he was Jewish, and I believe he was pretty strongly into Kabbalah, and he actually wrote like some I don't know if it was books or if it was essays, but he did some writing on the like quote unquote divine feminine and like the feminine side of God. So it's kind of weird to say the least. Um
yeah.
and
Well, he's a big New Ager too.
Yeah, and and it all goes together, right? Because the
It
New Age,
does.
the Kabbalah, I mean, it's all occultic. It's all a deception, and there's elements of it that sound true because it lures you in, and with that, that's any lie. There's a grain of truth, but
Right.
it's definitely a diversion from the true path of Christianity. That's for sure. Um, and so I've got C.I. Schofield, as you said. So C.I. Schofield is the man who kind of did even more. Darby was the one who systematized dispensationalism, right, on a theological level, like with his preaching. Um, C.I. Schofield was also a preacher and also preached it, but he was the one who kind of had a most direct hand in like the widespread publication and distribution of the ideas that really kind of led them to be adopted. And I think he had some help, some powerful help. And so I just wanted to note he had a history as a criminal. So he was convicted multiple times of forgery. He operated under an alias. He operated under the name Charlie Ingerson was his name in the criminal underworld. He he abandoned his family. He was an alcoholic. So he was not a model citizen. Now he did supposedly, uh, find the Lord and then kind of turn things around was his testimony, which, people have powerful testimonies, right? We've all sinned and we get pulled out of that, and we can turn our, well, we can't turn our lives around, but Jesus can turn our lives around, if we accept him. But that being said, he continued to commit acts of forgery even after the time that he had kind of identified as when he had a conversion to Christianity. So that, I don't know a person's heart and what the ultimate fate of his soul was or anything like that. I'm not trying to go there, but that puts his character and his credibility into serious question. I'll put it that way. So even though I'm a Christian now, it's like, okay, but what were the fruits, right? And more importantly, like how does that feed into kind of your labors that were sort of thrust upon the rest of us, right? And should we trust you, right? Essentially. Um, I'd also like to point out, you see in that little picture, it's the title page from the Schofield Bible. I don't know if that was him or if that was, an editor or someone, but someone credited him with having a doctorate of divinity, which though he became an ordained minister and did pastor a small church, he did not have a doctorate of divinity. So that right there was, now whether he himself told them to do that, I don't know, but that right there was a fraudulent claim. He or someone else apparently kind of gave him an unofficial honorary doctorate of divinity. So I'm just saying, that's now
Wow.
he somehow managed to join this New York Gentlemen's Club Society called the Lotus Club or the Lotus Club, depending on how you want to spell it. It's spelled two different ways. And that was a very wealthy, kind of secretive, very worldly, sort of wild, from what I understand, and disproportionately Jewish club of kind of the movers and shakers. It was based in New York. It was primarily Americans, but there were some British members as well, and there were certainly people who had connections to high profile people in British society as well. Now, this guy, he was an obscure preacher, right? He was not like, I mean, they didn't have televangelists back then, right? So, but even then, there were preachers who were much bigger than Schofield, right? Um, but somehow he was able to get Oxford University Press to, I say he was able to get, I think someone else on his behalf was able to arrange, uh, due to his connections in the Lotus Club, um, for his reference Bible, which had margin notes that interpreted the Word of God in this highly subjective and highly dispensationalist manner. Um, that was published in 1909, and it instantly was promoted by Oxford University Press, who published it, and the Rothschilds have huge connections to that as donors. And we'll come back to them in a second. But it was published by Oxford University Press first in 1909. Then there were subsequent editions. They honestly marketed the crap out of that thing. They, like, on both sides of the Atlantic, they printed many copies. They advertised it. They got bookstores to stock it. They made sure that the thing spread like wildfire, right? In 1917, it just so happened in the same year that the Balfour Declaration was issued. And if people know what the Balfour Declaration is, it was the proclamation done with the full approval of the British government by Lord Balfour to Lord Rothschild, guaranteeing that the British would be behind the backing of an Israeli, or I should say, quote, a Jewish state that would become, modern Israel in the land of historic Palestine. So the same year that was published, it just so happened that a new edition of the Schofield Bible was published that had an increased emphasis and additional margin notes to kind of hearken to the idea of, this reestablishment of modern, there needs to be a reestablishment of Israel in the Promised Land. Like, there needs to be the emergence of this new modern state of Israel, right? So direct political Zionism was put into the notes of the Schofield Bible, but not presented as like a little side piece, like, hey, today's current events, whatever. It was presented as like, this is the objective Word of God. This is how you interpret this. And it was an understanding that Christians up to that point did not have, other than people who were involved, in the dispensationalist denominations that Darby started, right? But Christians broadly did not have this understanding until the beginning, really, of the 20th century is when it really, really, really spread, right? Dispensationalism was invented in the 19th century, but it was promulgated by the Schofield Bible heavily in the 20th century, and it caught on very quickly because it coincided with the emergence of political Zionism, and with the encouragement of Schofield and others, Christians in the West, particularly in Great Britain and in the United States, were encouraged to kind of hop on board with the political movement of Zionism, because establishing this modern nation of Israel for the quote unquote chosen people, right, or this alternate people of God, the Jewish people, that was thought of as being a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and therefore something that, like, you as a good Christian should hop on board with that and help to support that and make that happen. But before that, nobody really in the Christian church, I mean, I'm sure there were like random individuals, right? But no denomination, no major school of thought within Christianity thought that any of that was necessary, or that it was, that you were meant to interpret the Bible that way, right? Until these guys came along and promulgated those ideas. So I also wanted to note that the Schofield Bible has blasphemy against the law of God, in my opinion, because he directly describes the Old Testament law that God had for the Israelites. And yes, we're told that there were flaws with the Old Covenant, but the flaws with the Old Covenant were with the people, right? It was that they couldn't live up to it. And so therefore, God graciously provided a different way. It wasn't that the law itself was broken, right? It wasn't that the law itself was evil or that it was unreasonable. It was that human nature being sinful, we couldn't live up to it, right? So, but Schofield described the Old Testament law of God as a ministry of condemnation and death. But then, paradoxically, he said, okay, so we don't have to follow that now, that Old Testament law, because we're in the church age. We can just put our faith in Christ. But national Israel will be returning to that following of the law in the future when the dispensation of the law reemerges after the church is raptured away. And then, somehow then it won't be a ministry of condemnation and death anymore. It'll be very reasonable and they'll be able to live up to it. So, it just, none of it adds up. None of it makes any sense. It's all really convoluted, and it's kind of a cynical way to interpret the Bible, kind of a sacrilegious way to interpret the Bible, in my opinion. But there it is. That's what it is, and those are the guys that brought it to us. So
Yeah, it almost makes me think of the Noahide laws. I mean, have you
yeah,
put any kind of thought into that with this topic?
yeah. I mean, I think that there's definitely a connection there, and yeah, I think it goes back to this idea of like that the Jews have their own way of getting to God, but that like other people have different ways that supposedly they're able to get to God, and it's like, no, there's one way. There always was one way. And it's through faith in the Messiah, either, in the Old Testament, the coming Messiah, right? The Messiah who hadn't arrived yet, but faith in the coming Messiah, and, attempting to do your best to obey God sort of in faith as you wait for that. Or, in the modern day, faith in Jesus, the Messiah who already came, right? But either way, it goes back to Jesus. He's the one whose sacrifice covers everyone for all time. Um, but yeah, the idea of like the Noahide laws and like those are my understanding, right, is that God's expectation is that those were kind of the laws for Gentiles, and it's different from the Mosaic law. But if you're a Gentile and you follow the Noahide law, that's what gets you salvation. Is that kind of that's the sort of the thesis of that, right?
Yeah, yeah, it just makes me think like this whole setup here could contribute to the things that the Antichrist will do.
Oh, for sure.
Basically bringing back those practices and
Yeah.
putting those authorities on the world.
Yeah.
Because you
And
even said,
putting a spin on it, right? So that it's
"Oh
done
yeah,
in worship of him instead of,
yes, yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
true God. Yeah.
yeah." It's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
This is good stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's crazy because it's like for Christians to like even with the view of like, well, I want to see prophecy fulfilled, for Christians to still even like support or even humor the idea that there's like any way to come to God except through Jesus, when we know better, right? We know that the only way to get to God is through accepting Jesus, for all people. And so for Christians to kind of like play along with that and encourage people in other practices just so that they can kind of see something happen, prophetically or eschatologically, it's really, I mean, it's just beyond sinful in my opinion. It's so bad.
Right, right. Goodness. Okay,
Yeah. Well,
so
that was just a warm up.
a warm up, right? Okay.
So, this dispensationalist system, which, like, honestly, like, does anybody now? Okay, I did present it in the most dismal way possible because I do think it's very bad. But, like, still, like, does anybody after hearing that, it's like, does anyone feel good about it? Right? Like, oh yeah, that's great. I want to get out my dispensational chart and kind of get on board with that. And yeah, let's get over this church age and get back to the dispensation of the law. And it's like, no, I don't think so. But nonetheless, there have been many in pop culture and Christian pop culture that have kind of gone in and dove in headfirst and really promoted this, right? So two of the major media franchises, if you will, or entities that promoted this were the book The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, and then the series of novels, the Left Behind. There's several books in that series, but the series of novels by Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins, and both of them presented this view of eschatology where there's a rapture, and then there's a shift in focus back onto national Israel, and then only after this tribulation where the people who were the church or the believers are gone, and then other people have to struggle through and come into the faith, and then Jesus will return at the end of it, right? Like all that was basically kind of put into the minds of Christians through media such as that. Those weren't the only ones, but those were the major ones, right? and the ones that got like really heavily promoted, at Christian bookstores and in churches and put in church libraries and et cetera, et cetera. And I know, like when I was a kid, I would see that stuff all around, right? Like in church libraries, or at the they used to have like the Family Christian Bookstore was in business, and they stocked all that stuff there. And really, it was like I just kind of thought that all that was in line with a biblical interpretation of the Bible. I didn't realize that it was, people kind of um, going a little bit off script, right, and promoting this very specific theology of dispensationalism that is not the standard Christian interpretation of the Bible, right? So really, it's kind of doing that has involved essentially gaslighting. The American Christian church has been gaslit to believe that dispensationalism is like the literal and default interpretation of the Bible. And when you look at it scripturally and you look at it historically, you realize that it's not. It's something that was created and then pushed on the church. But the way that it's talked about is as if, like, if you read the Bible and you take it literally and you have faith, then that's like all that you could possibly come away with is this idea of, Israel still is the chosen people of God, and there's going to be a pre-tribulation rapture, and the church is going to be taken away. And none of that is biblical in my view. And certainly none of that is historically understood by the church. That's all new. All right. But they gaslight you because they don't tell you that. They essentially just kind of go on with promoting these doctrines as if that is just what's expected, is that you just believe in them by default, and you don't have to be, kind of justifying even why you believe in them. They just, and they use this pejorative term, replacement theology. They use the term replacement theology. You'll hear that from Zionists. They talk about covenant theologians or fulfillment theologians as being, quote, replacement theology. You're coming along with your replacement theology. The problem is they're trying to imply that that is the new theology. But again, it's like as if a transgender person was saying, you're coming along with your cisgender lifestyle. And it's like, no, I'm coming along doing what like humans did, throughout all of history, and understood that like I was born a man and I'm a man, right? But you've got the new thing, which, it's like, I'm not trying to be hateful on anyone who's, struggling with that. But my point is, you've got that thing over there, but then you're trying to make it sound like yours is the default and mine is the new one, where it's the other way around, right? And so that's what they do when they talk about replacement theology. And also they kind of imply with that wording, I believe, that you're sort of saying that like God is fickle, or that God just tossed the Jews aside and he just replaced them, and he just kind of doesn't stick to his promises. And that's not what, and we went over all the scripture behind why, basically why people should buy into covenant theology. So I'm not going to go over all that again tonight. But in the last episode, we talked about how God is not breaking his covenant to the Jews to require that they accept Christ to be saved. And God is not, replacing them, quote unquote, by bringing Gentiles into the Israel of God. And it just so happens that the way that demographically things shook out, there are more Gentiles who are members of the church or the Israel of God than there are ethnic Jews. But that does not mean that the Jews are not able to be a part of that just as much as they ever were through faith, right? So this idea that you're believing in this like arbitrary replacement is really kind of nonsensical. And then not only that, but you have on a political level preachers who take the theology and they make it political, right? Like my pastor at a church that I attended, and well, I was a member of actually until very recently, but I don't go there anymore. Not just for this reason, but and it's not a bad church, and there are good people there, and even the pastor, I like him, so I'm not trying to like badmouth it. And if anybody's listening who goes there, but my point is that I had this conversation with him, and he's a good man, but he said to me, I was talking to him about Christian Zionism and why I'm opposed, and dispensationalism and all that. And he was like, well, you're kind of mixing the two, and you're making it like political, right? Like, he's like, maybe like you could have an opinion on that, but then you could support or not support Israel, and that's separate. And so why, don't make it political. But what I said was, well, the thing is, like, other people already made it political. I'm trying to disentangle it. Other people came in and basically said that, you have to accept this system of dispensationalism, and therefore you have to accept political Zionism, and therefore as a Christian your duty is to support political Israel as a national entity, and if you don't, then you're being disobedient to God and you're hateful and you don't like the Jews and yada yada. And what I'm saying is no, you have to kind of take it from both, because it's the fact that this bad theology has a spiritual stronghold on people that makes them feel obligated to give political support that they might not otherwise freely choose to give. So for me, when I'm making it political, I'm not the one who made it political. I'm addressing the fact that it was made political, and I'm trying to take the theology, and I can't do this single-handedly. I'm not saying but I'm I'm fighting for the cause of taking the theology back because it's incorrect theology, and saying, no, you can't have our spiritual allegiance. We don't owe you, as national Israel, we don't owe you our spiritual devotion. That belongs only to God, and we are the church who is the Israel of God. So we worship God, and we are not obligated to support any particular country on a political level. So you can do it for moral reasons, if you like them better, if you think that it benefits the United States, whatever. But for practical reasons, but we don't have to do it, is my point. So I'm taking that back and disentangling it, and I'm saying, so just look at political Israel as a political issue. Don't look at it like your spiritual obligation. And then when you do that, make an informed decision about whether or not you support it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But there have been pastors, like for instance, John Hagee, who has literally threatened curses on people who who opposed political Israel, right? The modern country of Israel. Like for instance, he said the day America turns its back on Israel is the day God will turn his back on America. So these kind of like ham-handed, really over-the-top threats. He even threatened that the children and grandchildren of people who spoke out against Israel would be punished by God. So again, that's the collective punishment that Christian Zionists like so much, that we see in Gaza. But the point is, that's just so unbiblical, and it's so disingenuous to say, the Bible tells you to support this country politically. That's just, it's not at all. So if anybody's out there struggling with, fear and thinking, oh, I don't know, like I've seen some stuff about Israel and it kind of makes sense that I maybe pull back a little bit of my support, but I don't want God to be mad at me. They're the chosen people. I don't want to be cursed. I'm here to tell you that, in my opinion, that's basically malarkey, right? So like, do your own research and decide whether or not you want to support Israel, but don't let some pastor on TV or even in the pulpit at your church scare you into thinking that if you have a different political opinion, you're going to go to hell or God's going to punish you and your descendants, because that is just so outside the bounds of what's in the Bible that it's like not even funny.
Yeah, it says here, the famous quote by Pastor John Hagee is, "The day America turns its back on Israel is the day God's will turn his back on America."
Yeah.
And it says here that the sentiment is a core pillar of his ministry and his organization, Christians United for Israel.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about some of the dirty deeds that they do. That organization has provided financial support to campaigns that have literally resulted in people's deaths, and I'll talk about that. So I'm not making a libelous statement when I say that. It's actually, I'm dead serious, and we'll talk about that with like settler violence in the West Bank. But beyond that, uh, yeah, that's like the whole point of it. And also he declares that, they're friends of Israel, right? That's like his big thing, that we're like the friends of Israel. We have to have Israel's back. I'm going to talk about the ultimate aims of Christian Zionism and what they think is going to happen to every Jewish person who is in Israel. And I think we'll see by the end of this that a lot of the people who purport to be friends, quote unquote, of Israel or of the Jewish people are not. And in fact, there's a lot of anti-Semitism that's at play within Christian Zionism, but it's disguised as this quote unquote support. So, it's supposed to be friendly, but there's a lot of it that's actually very exploitative and downright dark. And we'll get into that. Um, and then really though, the verse that they point to for that whole idea of like the blessing and cursing is Genesis 12:3, right? Where God tells Abraham, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. I will make your name great, and through you all the nations will be blessed, right? But God was talking to Abraham as an individual man. about what would happen in his life, and he honored that. He blessed those who blessed Abraham, and he cursed those who cursed Abraham. Um, and he was talking about, the nations would be blessed through Abraham because the establishment of Israel and that line ultimately led to Jesus Christ, who provided salvation to the entire world. So he is the blessing, and so that was all fulfilled, right? So to take a promise that God made to Abraham as an individual man and then say that it still applies to the nation of Israel to this day, the modern secular nation of Israel, um, and that, Christians will be reaping these curses on themselves if they don't bend over backwards to support everything that that country does. That is just so manipulative, so dishonest. And, like Ted Cruz said something similar when he was on a show with Tucker Carlson, and Carlson was kind of questioning him about it. And, he said, well, the Bible says if you bless Israel, you'll be blessed, and I want to be blessed. And Tucker said, well, where does it say that? And he couldn't point to it. He didn't know the verse. He didn't know the chapter. I think this is probably what he was thinking of, but even so, he misquoted it dramatically. But a lot of Christian Zionists have been told this so much. It's a slogan. It's not a scripture. It's a slogan. Like, bless Israel and you will be blessed. Curse Israel and you will be cursed. And they have that beat into their heads on a political level, and they think that that's what the Bible says, but they don't realize that that is a totally man-made and fabricated sentiment behind that.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't trust Tucker at all.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I feel like he's trying to reverse the Protestant movement
Mm.
into something bigger. These things haven't happened yet, but the trend and the patterns of things that
Yeah.
I see, I could see he's going to switch and go Catholic and start maybe go Orthodox and then just
I
start
I was I
bringing
was thinking
everybody in.
that myself about the Catholic and Orthodox thing. One thing I'll say about him though, I'm gonna respectfully disagree on that one, although I know what you're saying. I think
Hmm.
theologically he's weak and some of the things that he promotes are not correct. But I don't think that he's doing it on purpose. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he's doing it on purpose, like to push like some kind of one world agenda or anything like that. I
Hmm.
think he just himself is I do think he's a Christian, but I don't think he's a very well-read biblical Christian, but I think he believes in Jesus. I do think he believes in the gospel. And I think you got to remember too, he's the host of a secular political talk show. So I mean, he's kind of taking things from like a sort of like um bring all the, sort of the coalition together, in support of the issues that he's, concerned about. And so he says things that I think sound a little like, and maybe they are, maybe he isn't. I don't know what's in his heart, but I mean, he says things that sound a little like, yeah, we're trying to unite everybody. But to me, I'm thinking that's more for like political reasons. I don't think he's like trying to present himself as like a theologian, like I'm going to unite everybody spiritually.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, it's anybody's guess. I mean, I don't know what's in the guy's heart. So, I mean, you could be totally right, but I'm just saying, like, for me, I like him because I kind of look at him more as like a political figure than I'm not looking to him for spiritual guidance.
Hmm.
So, what he's done, I think, to like expose, things going on in Israel and the people he's hosted on the show, and the risk, in my opinion, the risk to his very life that he's taken to like stand up to Donald Trump and to stand up to Israel and the Mossad and all that with, um, I mean, people have been killed, I think, for doing similar things. So, um,
Yeah.
possibly Charlie Kirk, in my opinion, he was heading in that direction, and it was cut off. And I know like Candace Owens, and I'm guessing you might feel the same way about her, but at least I will
Well,
say with
all of
her,
them have some sort of tie with the CNP. I mean, and I got
yeah,
some backlash from some people about, um, I guess maybe how I brought Charlie Kirk into the conversation or something like that.
yeah,
But you can't deny the facts that these people, including Tucker Carlson and
yeah,
others, Candace Owens, Charlie
uh-huh,
Kirk, Erica Kirk, the whole dialectic of this right wing uh, uh, conservatism and these platforms,
yeah,
they're highly connected to the Council for National Policy, and the
eh,
Council for National Policy is nothing different than like a Council of Foreign Relations. They're
Oh,
they're
okay.
they're they're and this is something you'll
Are
learn,
they
man.
considered
You'll learn
like false
as you go with all
opposition, or are
this.
they like allies
Well,
with each other? Or?
think of like you having a subscription to a fraternity, right?
Okay.
It's not that you it's not that you have to be there for every meeting or whatever, but
Yeah.
you were invited to be a part of something that's, I mean, 20 times bigger than their platforms.
Yeah.
So when they do that, they have some sort of dues. In my opinion, this is just, I think, how
Sure.
it works. You can't just be a
Yeah.
part of something and not not hold your end of the bargain, right? Like you have to you're bought
Yeah.
at some point by these little tiny councils or societies. They're not really small.
Yeah.
They're big, but they absorb the people who have the abilities and the platforms to distribute propaganda. And that
Yeah.
propaganda, like there are right wing, like, what are we talking about right now? We're talking about people that were in the church, a
Uh-huh.
part of the church,
Uh-huh.
setting theology perspectives for a
Right.
future
To
church, and then
co-opted by a
that future
political
church
agenda.
is, it's all leading to the falling away with a lot of these people.
Yeah.
And I would just kind of uh, 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 let this be some sort of wisdom for the people, but start
Yeah.
to exercise questioning things a little bit more than like accepting what someone says because you agree with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, like that's one thing, right? Like people can say things that you agree with all day and you'll be like, "Yeah, I'll vote for them."
Yeah.
The thing is what are their fruits? What are they connected to? What is the source? There's
Right.
some
Yeah.
sort of source that's driving a lot of these people.
Yeah.
Now they can say good things. I
Yeah.
agree with that
I wonder if
100%.
some of them have been kind of like co-opted into it unwittingly though. Like maybe they're
No,
promoting
I
things.
think they can be a part of it ignorantly. They don't even
Yeah.
have to understand
In
what it
my
is that
view,
they're a
if
part of.
and I don't know, I just I gotta admit, I know we disagree on it. I'm kind of a
Yeah.
Tucker fanboy.
Oh
But
no, it's okay.
well,
It's
I
all good.
but
You'll
you know,
come
I
around.
it is what it is. Yeah,
Well,
maybe. I
what
mean,
I'm
I'll
saying by
research.
that is
I'm gonna
you'll
research all that for sure.
well,
But my
yeah.
thing with him is, it's like if he's in on that agenda, in my mind, I can't imagine it's intentional. I feel like he got brought into it under a false pretense, and he's not understanding what he's doing.
Well,
Not that that necessarily would
think
make it better, but you know,
think of it all as one big plan. There's one big
yeah,
plan, and there is a plan. I mean, it's written on paper as
yeah,
capital T, capital P, the plan.
yeah,
And the New Age is involved. I mean, a lot of the people you were just bringing up in just today's show are a part of these philosophical groups that relate to the New Age, right? Like, there's
yeah.
a bunch of different religions and things that
Oh
people
yeah.
of the occult have created,
And I know
and
Tucker, like his family. I know he's kind of from like a blue blood, sort of Anglo American
well, he's
type
got a
tradition.
Mockingbird background and stuff like that, and that's pretty much where that's old news, but that's kind of how these CIA agents would get out into the
Yeah,
media
Project Mockingbird and all that.
platforms and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I can think though with that is I'm like, if he's supporting that, like if he's a Mockingbird piece for the CIA, they must be ready to dump Israel because I mean he's going hard after
Well,
Israel.
that's the whole point too, right? Behind all this kind of propaganda. Number one, in my opinion, is that they're pushing all of this Zionist movement, and they're pushing all of this hidden information about how Israel is
Yeah.
connected to all and everything. They're
Yeah.
running the world. In my
Yeah.
opinion, that's all psychological operation, not meaning that that this stuff isn't true, but it's
Yeah.
how are they using it to where do they want humanity to go? And I think where they want humanity to go along with the world is
Yeah.
to turn against Israel, because that's something that
Could be.
prophetically has to happen to bring in the Messiah. Like the
There you
Jews,
go.
like the Israel's over there now, like they believe parts of the Bible that we
Yeah.
still have here, right? They just don't believe the prophecies that,
Yeah.
express Jesus Christ and all of these things. They don't accept Jesus, but
Yeah.
they're wanting to bring their Messiah, the Mashiach, in, right? Like
Yeah.
and there's things that
Yeah.
have to happen
And
before that
yeah, and
technically
like we
takes
talked about
place.
before, and I'm gonna get into it even more today, I think that their Messiah is gonna be the Antichrist,
Oh,
th
sure.
their
Yeah.
perceived Messiah. Yeah, and I don't know, it's interesting, and I'm gonna look into all that stuff, maybe send me a couple, links or
Yeah,
something
yeah, yeah,
online, and
definitely.
I'll look into it with Tucker, but to me, my impression of him and, again, I could be wrong, and this the topic isn't really Tucker. It doesn't really matter for this,
Hmm.
but in in my estimation, I'm thinking he was raised in a, let me be honest, a spiritually weak denomination, right? Episcopalian. A lot of Episcopalians are in it effectively. It's very liberal now. A lot of them are effectively in it for socializing and family tradition. He's kind of admitted that that was like sort of his affinity with it for the longest time. But then I think recently he's had sort of a renewed, based on what he talks about, he's had kind of a renewed like interest in the Bible and kind of like making faith his own and the gospel. Um, but that doesn't mean that he's a strong Christian or a developed Christian, or that he couldn't be easily being co-opted by people on a spiritual level. Um, when it comes to the nation of Israel on a secular political level and his opposition to them, I think he's doing the Lord's work, because you'll, when I talk about it, everybody will kind of hear about like a lot of the really evil connections with Israel. But I get what you're saying. But could that be part of a larger aim that is actually anything but the Lord's work?
Oh, the Lord could do
Maybe.
work through anybody, right?
Or the
Like, I
Lord could do
mean,
work through yeah,
sure, sure. I
evil
mean,
or misguided people. Yeah, that's true.
I'd hate to say it, but I just feel like a lot of people, and this isn't me saying that Tucker isn't a Christian. I don't
Yeah,
know.
sure.
But what I'm going to
Sure.
do is evaluate who you're affiliated with, what
Yeah,
your
yeah,
affiliations are with the rest of these people,
yeah,
and what organizations do you pay tribute to, and who
yeah,
are you loyal to,
yeah,
and what's your background? Who are you, right?
yeah, yeah,
This is what people decide not to look into because it's too much work. But
yeah,
they'll choose to, hey, I'll get my info from him, from his
yeah,
platform,
yeah,
or who he goes on and talks with. That's not enough. You have to understand the fruit of these people, and the really only
yeah.
way to do that is to actually dig for information that
About their
we're not
backgrounds.
really supposed to see.
Yeah, got
You
it.
know?
Yeah. Well,
It's
yeah.
wild.
Send me. Yeah, send me some stuff. I'll look into it, because, um,
It's just something to keep an open mind with
yeah,
this,
yeah,
because this is how the enemy really works.
sure,
He infiltrates, and he puts people in positions
yeah,
that have some sort of charisma
yeah.
with
And honestly, like, yeah, and
the church.
I would be extremely, extremely blinded if I didn't acknowledge that that could be a possibility with him, because, like you said, I literally just talked about these guys who were used like for that exact purpose. So, yeah, I mean, it could be. I hope not. Like I said, right now I like the guy a lot,
Yeah.
but I'll look into it and really try to
Well,
be
it's kind of
discerning.
like Russell
Yeah.
Brand. Russell
Oh
Brand
yeah,
is
I
a
will say
Christian, right? But
I was
he's
listening to that podcast, and again with Brand, it's like I don't know if he's sincere or not, but I was seeing a lot wrong with what he was saying, and that is the first book that Tucker has like chosen to publish under his publishing imprint, was like Russell Brand's book. But again, it's like I don't know if that's, a lot of that is new age, but I mean Russell Brand is someone who supposedly came out of was saved away from Eastern religion. So it's hard to say how much of that is him trying to infuse that into Christianity to deceive people, or how much of that is him with his old vocabulary trying to apply it to his new faith and just not doing very well and not being biblical about it clearly.
Yeah,
But
in my opinion, like, because I've seen people that were involved in Eastern religion, they get
yeah,
saved, and then what do they do afterwards? Like, Russell could be easily exposing all of Eastern mysticism, the counterfeit trinity that's within it,
yeah,
and how it's leaked its way over here into the Western world. He could be doing that, right?
yeah.
That
Do you
would be
think
like an
instead he's kind
Ephesians
of like running
5:11.
running cover for it, or sort of
Well, this
incorporating?
is the thing, man. Lucifer is setting up an a cosmic Christ. He's setting up a cosmic Jesus, and I think
Yeah,
what he's been setting up for even longer time is a counterfeit Jesus in
yeah,
some sort of way that people think it's the Lord, but really it's not. Now, again, like, I'm not saying these people don't truly believe, but what I'm saying is
yeah,
how they are talking about Jesus in the various ways that they are, it doesn't line up with the biblical Jesus. And it could
yeah,
just be that they get one thing wrong, but it spreads an entire
yeah,
theological perspective of Jesus, you know.
yeah. It very well
It's
could be.
interesting. That's where
Yeah,
the
it
new
is
age comes
for
into
sure.
all of this. That's where the new apostolic reformation comes into this, you
Yeah,
know, and the evangelicals and the charismatics
But
and
it's interesting because unless the thing is, and I know they could be playing both sides because I know about like the Hegelian dialect and all that, but dialectic. But to
yeah.
me, it's like I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of like the really alarming kind of like NAR type people, like Pete Hegseth, Paula White, and they're like on the ultra Zionist militaristic side. And then
Hmm.
you have like somebody like Tucker, who I know is associated with Russell Brand and who is saying, some of these things, but he's like so opposed to it. So I don't know how to square that
Well,
away.
that's what they're doing right now. That's a
Mm,
part of the psychological operation, is to demoralize the person. So you create two facets that talk about the same topic, but have totally separate perspectives.
yeah.
Like, very similar to like Candace Owens and Erica Kirk. This is going to drag out as long as people decide to continue to give it attention. They're going to drag out the dialectic. They're going to
Yeah.
move through the system with just kind of beating people up
Yeah.
psychologically, right?
The thing
I
about Candace
think
though
that's
is
what's
it's
going
like
on.
the Catholicism angle, like, and I know there's a lot of problems with the Catholic Church. I do believe though that a lot of people within it are saved,
Sure.
but there are problems with it institutionally, big time. But the thing I like about her approach with it, I know you talked about like Tucker's kind of seems like he's leaning Catholic or leaning Orthodox, but it's hard to, with her, I
I'm
mean,
saying
at least.
he's going to. I'm saying it's
Yeah.
coming down the
Well,
road
I was
from the
thinking,
things that
to
he
be honest, I
said.
was thinking that too. He had an Orthodox priest on, and they were talking about the Nephilim and all this stuff. And it was actually super interesting. But I was thinking to myself, he kind of sounds like he's one step away from maybe becoming Orthodox himself. That was just the impression I got. But uh, with Candace, though, I will say she's obviously Catholic, and she's like very open about that, and she's like telling people, and I don't think she's right, but she's telling people like this is the true Christian church, like join it. So at least she's not like hiding the ball on that. You know what I mean? She's like very open about trying to evangelize people for Catholicism. I think that's a little bit misguided, but I think she's sincere. Like whether or not now again is
Yeah.
sincere, but maybe she is being manipulated by other forces. I don't know, but I don't think she's consciously, you know what I mean? Like that's my take, but I mean, but I don't really know, at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
Yeah. So where are we at? Where are we at? So
Yeah.
we're still here in the
Yeah, we can get John Hagee off the screen and that would be a
John
blessing.
Hagee.
So
Yes. Get on him.
the um so yeah, okay, so here's some kind of juicy stuff. And
There we
I
go.
say that not to make light of it. I mean, it's actually really bad. It's spiritually dark, but we can talk now about Kabbalah, right? And now I kind of made a connection between Kabbalah and this is going to be controversial, and this will be really controversial with some people at my former church, probably if they're listening. But um, I really think that the charismatic movement has become very, very new age and like influenced by that kind of I don't want to say that kind of vibe because then I sound new age, but you know what I mean. That kind of
Hmm.
philosophy, that vocabulary, right? Um, and honestly, like I think that like particularly like Word of Faith and other, the whole name it and claim it prosperity gospel, they are using a Kabbalistic worldview in the way that they speak, like a Kabbalistic vocabulary and outlook on life. And I don't think that they're doing it on purpose, right? Like not, your run of the mill Assembly of God person or whatever is not, sitting around reading the Kabbalah, doing incantations, whatever. But I think that kind of influence has crept into the movement and has led a lot of people astray. And I've seen a little bit of that firsthand, and I don't want to go publicly, and it's a little bit off topic anyway, so I don't want to go publicly into that, like stories that I have personally, but I've seen that firsthand, so I kind of am very like wary of it right now and like hyper vigilant. Um, but and right now I'm attending, and I don't know if it's going to be my final church home, but I'm attending a Baptist church, but I'm going to meet with the pastor and see where he stands on dispensationalism and where the church stands on Zionism and if they're involved in any of the political activities, the John Hagee type stuff, because if they are, then, I'll be going elsewhere. But as far as I could tell, kind of digging around, I don't think that they are. I just started attending it fairly recently and I have a meeting scheduled with the pastor. It's a fairly large church. So, that's pending. But okay, but anyway, sorry, getting back to this. But with the charismatic stuff, right? Like, the way that I see the connection there is that there's this idea that like you can use the human will and like manifest what you want, right? The name it and claim it. And supposedly like it's cuz like, oh, you're having faith and you're using the power of faith and the word of God, but the way that I see it, you're just trying to use the power of God as a tool. And it's like if you say the right words or you say them with the right sincerity, like they're very a lot of people, and this is kind of like the extreme far end of it, right? But a lot of people in that are like very superstitious about the way they talk. Like for instance, if you get sick, they won't say like I'm sick right now, I need to go to the doctor. They'll say like I'm not sick, I don't receive that. Like I don't receive an illness in the name of Jesus. Like the blood covers me and I'm healed. And they'll be sitting there sneezing and coughing and saying I'm not sick. And so to me, that seems very like occultic. And I don't think that they mean for it to be. I think that they're trying to have a lot of faith,
Well,
you know?
it goes back to the what's called as the law of attraction, which is pretty much like this belief that your thoughts and emotions emit a vibrational frequency that
Yeah.
like attracts similar
Like the power of positive
experiences,
thinking type of
people, and
deal, right?
yes, power of positive thinking, right? That's
Yeah.
a Norman Vincent Peale, right? I think that's the guy's name.
Yeah.
That's Trump's, I mean, pastor that he grew
Yeah.
up with.
He's got some real winners in there on his little spiritual advisory team. But,
Yeah, Norman Vincent Peale. Yeah.
but yeah, it's like to me,
And
and
that's
to
what I'm
me,
saying, man. Like these are Freemasons and occultists in the church.
yeah,
So with that said, I think it's just that much easier, and we're seeing it with
yeah,
big platform people
yeah,
claiming to be Christian. Now, I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm just
yeah.
saying that it's the potential is there.
But they're claiming it under a system and a theology and a philosophy that they're espousing that might mislead people, kind of is what you're saying. Yeah,
Sure, sure, and they
yeah,
they may they may still be deceived in certain things or whatever, or maybe they're trying, right?
yeah.
But but they're still worldly. I don't know. There's something off about it, but
Yeah. No, I think that there is certainly. Yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy, but in my view, the way that they're like applying that to Israel is that they are basically well, a couple of reasons, a couple ways. One, I feel like they're trying to almost like manifest occultly like this version of Israel that they want to be the case. Like they want for it so bad to be like the fulfillment of prophecy and like this like holy nation, right? That they're ignoring a lot of reality in order to basically like approach it and interact with it as if it was like the biblical Israel like under King David or something. Like and it's like so ridiculously not that it's and we'll go into a lot of the history of the, the dirty deeds and skullduggery that's, been committed and is being committed. But like it's so obviously not that it's almost laughable to try to act like it is. And then also there's like it goes back to like the curse idea. There's this like superstitious like belief that like God says bless Israel and you'll be blessed, curse Israel and you'll be cursed. So this is like a test of my faith. So if I look at my TV screen and I see, 100 dead bloody children laying there or starving people or a burned out Christian church that the IDF, incinerated, oh, I cannot say that was wrong because that's God will get me, because I cursed Israel. And first of all, I don't think a criticism is the same as cursing someone even. But like, regardless, like, okay, whatever. That's the point is like, you should be able to use your eyes. You should be able to look at the rest of the Bible and you should be able to say, well, that is objectively spiritually wrong. I don't care who did it. It's wrong. Right. And, the thing is too, like, it's just, for me, it's like, it's so frustrating because, I talked about that last week with the idolatry piece. Last week, last time we talked. It's so like frustrating because it's like they have so committed themselves emotionally, spiritually, I guess, like to this idea and this allegiance to Israel that like a lot of people, these radical Christian Zionists, like they literally do not care like what reality is. They are going to just say what they think they need to say until reality conforms. So to me, that is just at that point it's occultic, Um,
yeah.
Also like this idea of kind of almost idolizing the Jewish people. And the reason I say the Jewish people is because the Christian Zionists conflate national Israel with all Jewish people. So for purposes of the conversation, like of what they believe, I'm going to say that that's what they're doing, right? So that actually fits with a really kind of evil concept within Judaism that's called incarnation. Are you familiar with that?
I have, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that I understand it, you can tell me if you think this is accurate, but the way that I understand it is that basically it's saying that the presence of God dwells within all Jewish people, and to the degree, like it's almost kind of like people automatically having the Holy Spirit, but on the basis of like their race and not like anything to do with faith. Um, and so the God, the presence of God is so like just in the Jewish people and associated with the Jewish people that literally you could not even believe in God, but if you're doing things to help the Jewish people, you're like honoring God through that. And it's almost like a religious right to just like have this like unwavering loyalty to all Jewish people. And that's a Jewish concept, and it's not biblical concept, not Christian concept certainly. And but Christian Zionists have basically bought into that mentality, hook, line, and sinker when it comes to Israel and this unconditional support for Israel, because they think it's like the manifestation of like all the Jewish people and prophecy and all this. So basically it's taking this really like self-idolatrous and kind of racist concept that exists within Judaism, and now Christians have latched onto it and are embracing it. So to me, that's like just really inverted, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting, man.
Yeah. And then that also fits kind of, and when you combine the two, that's where the nightmare comes in. We're gonna cover some of the things that modern Israel has done. And if you're like me, by the end of it, you may be thinking like, how in the world did, Christians say that was okay? But it's when you combine these two things, when you combine first incarnation, the idea of this almost like superstitious, like the Jewish people as a whole are immune from criticism because they've just got God basically all around and within them just because of how they were born. You've got that combined with this Kabbalistic idea, which the Kabbalistic idea is actually opposed. I will give only a little bit of credit to traditional Orthodox Judaism. And when I say that, I'm not saying I'm I'm thinking about one of the comments I saw in the last video. I'm not saying that that's salvific. I'm not saying go believe in the Talmud. I do not accept the Talmud. I do not support the Talmud in any way. But it's Kabbalah is actually more in some ways more violent and more sort of arrogant and like directly entitled even than like traditional Talmudic Judaism. And what I mean by that is that, I talked about it in the last episode. For the longest time, there was this idea among the Jewish people because of a Talmudic interpretation, which again, I'm not endorsing the Talmud. I'm just acknowledging that that's what they believed. Because of that, that the Jews were supposed to wait and not settle into national Israel until their Messiah came. But the Kabbalistic philosophy allowed for a more active and militarily aggressive approach and saying, no, we need to go make it happen. We need to do it for ourselves. We're not going to wait for God. We're not going to wait for a Messiah because, according to Kabbalah, human actions influence the divine. So what happens, quote, below influences what will happen above. Like God will move on your behalf if you move on your own behalf first, is the idea. It's kind of like Ben Franklin, a Freemason, who said like God helps those who help themselves, which is a very Kabbalistic way of putting it. In reality, our help is in Jesus, right? We can't really do anything apart from God and apart from
Right.
the grace of God. So but it's easy to see how that could be seductive to people, especially worldly people, because it's like, yeah, it feels good. It's like empowerment. Like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go get it. Let's go get it. Let's get Israel. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. And the thing is, it's like, okay, and maybe on a political level, if that had been done in some right way, okay, whatever, that's not spiritually valid, but okay, make things happen for yourself. Be a self-starter. Why not? But the fact that like that could then be used to say, well, it's spiritual to act aggressively, politically and militarily is not only a spiritual, something that's acceptable spiritually, but it's actually our spiritual duty to do this. that then opens a can of worms where you can literally slaughter people. You can literally, steal people's land. You can just steamroll over other human beings and say, well, God's on our side. He wants this. We're doing this for ourselves, and he's going to honor our efforts. And that Kabbalism crept into mainstream Judaism, and more importantly for this topic, into um, Zionism, political Zionism, both Jewish Zionism and Christian Zionism. And so people then started to basically say, well, quote unquote Israel, right? People who were settling that land of historic Palestine, uh, they are justified in doing like whatever to grab it in the name of the Jewish people and make this state of Israel because it's divine. God is with them. They're his chosen people. It's going to bring about the fulfillment of prophecy. So whatever they do, we got to get behind it. And so when you combine those two things, the incarnation doctrine with the Kabbalistic philosophy of like basically as below, so above, which is wrong and satanic on two levels. It's like an inversion of something that's problematic. But when you take those things in tandem, it makes for a hellish outlook in which you could justify literally anything in the name of this quote unquote spiritual destiny. So it's really dark, really dangerous.
Yeah, and a lot of it. Oh, okay. A lot of it makes me think of Barbara Marx Hubbard is well, she passed away, but she was a really big affiliate for the New Age movement, and they are kind of like this. They have the same views as post millennial
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
where it's kind of like the New Apostolic Reformation wants to build the kingdom of God here. The Kabbalah is about bringing the kingdom of God here. The Seven
uh-huh,
Mountain Mandate also is showing
yep,
the same kind of thing.
yeah,
Alice Bailey's Seven Rays,
yeah,
uh, you know, Blavatsky's Seven Root Races. Everything is contributing a narrative
yeah. It's all about seven too,
about establishing heaven here on
and
earth.
that's a counterfeit, right? Because seven is supposed to be like God's number, right? The perfect number
Yeah,
seven.
yeah, but
So
it makes me think, man, that they're trying to set up a millennial reign.
yeah,
And I think that that's what the Antichrist is
yeah. They're
going to
trying to like
take
set up
hold
a
of.
millennial reign ahead of Jesus,
Ahead of
essentially.
Jesus, right, right, right.
Yeah,
But the whole idea too is where I think that people um will be fed that this is the progress, and this is the what they have to do in order to establish a new heaven and a new earth. That
yeah,
they're the ones that are in control of it, that it's God working, right? As above, so below, kind of like what
yep,
you were saying.
yeah,
They believe that they are God,
yeah.
and that
That's because of that
the
incarnation.
like the New Age
Yeah,
literally believes that they are fulfilling God's will.
uh-huh,
And Barbara Marx Hubbard even said that they are the pale horse,
yeah,
that the New Age and the people that are for the shift, for going into this new world,
yeah,
that they are the pale horse, that the people that can't move with the shift physically, right, or
yeah. They're
whatever,
gonna get left behind.
the people that choose not to, or the people that resist from shifting into this,
Yeah,
they're going to die.
they're gonna be
Like
killed, right?
this is literally what they say. They say
Yeah.
that it's part of the God's purification process.
Yeah, and that's
You
like
know,
kind of on a
like
micro
that's the
level.
pale horse, man. Like
Oh yeah,
that's
it's totally, yeah, it's really sick, and I think on a micro level that's what's happening with Israel. I know like what you're talking about is supposed to be, global, right? And
yeah,
but on a micro level, it's like that kind of mentality. That's almost like what's happening. It's like those who can't get on board with this reestablishment of Israel, greater Israel, aka like the Palestinian people, like just wipe them out. Like they're not part of God's plan. Just get rid of them. Right?
yeah.
They're Amalek, as Benjamin Netanyahu said. And when someone's Amalek, that means you kill them. Man, woman, children, babies, animals. You
I even
raise.
heard Christians, bro, saying that
Yeah,
there are other Christians out there that are keeping us from moving to this goal,
yeah,
and that literally those Christians have the spirit of the Nephilim.
yep,
And I'm like, aha, I see how God's using
Yep.
the whole Nephilim giant thing again, because this isn't something that's new, but it's roughly like culturally new. You
I'm
know, like
I'm
people,
convinced if I were more important, if I were, and I don't really want to be honest, but if I were more famous or whatever, more prominent, I am convinced that there are people, supposed Christians, Christian Zionists, who have the mentality that you just described, who would literally kill me or want to kill me or think that, they'd be happy if some calamity
right?
befell me because of the things that I'm saying about Israel, you know.
Yeah, right
Um
on, right on.
there's
But hey,
I
go ahead, continue with your thing real quick. I'm just
Yeah,
gonna tell my
yeah,
dog to stop barking, but go ahead, keep running it.
yeah, go for it. Okay, so you have this character who came along named Don Isaac Abarbanel. He was a 15th century Portuguese Jewish politician and author, and he posited this theory that the Jewish Messiah would be perceived by Christians as the Antichrist. In other words, he was obviously aware of the Christian doctrine that there would be an Antichrist, and he said that that Christians had invented the idea of an Antichrist to discredit the Jewish Messiah in favor of Jesus, who he saw as a false Messiah. So he basically was urging the Jewish people, whoever would read his books and things, that if someone came along and Christians were warning them, saying this is the Antichrist, to accept that person because they were probably the Messiah. So that's again with the inversion, right? And
Hmm.
also like with the Kabbalistic Zionism, the idea is that the Messiah, there's this concept of possibly two messiahs, like dual messiahs within um within it. And there's the idea that there might be a messiah or a messiah type that comes called Messiah, son of Joseph. And that messiah is going to be a political or military leader and will actually be a very violent person. So we talked about last week, like how someone like Benjamin Netanyahu could potentially be like a messiah, son of Joseph character, according to the quote unquote Kabbalistic messianic script. And Then there would be Messiah, son of David, who would and there's debate within Judaism. Are they two different people? Are they two personality elements of the same person? But there's this idea of Messiah, son of Joseph, and Messiah, son of David within Jewish Messianism. And the idea, though, is that there's a potential that someone, and this goes back to the incarnation thing, there could be a Messiah who's acting aggressively on behalf of Israel and on behalf of quote unquote the Jewish people, and that person's a messiah even if they're not a practicing Jew at all, even if they don't believe in God. So that could be someone like Benjamin Netanyahu. They could give some people said retroactively that they think that like Theodore Herzl was the messiah or was a type of messiah. He was essentially an atheist, as far as we know. And yeah, basically like this idea that the messiah doesn't even have to be like, you think that like even in the Jewish view, obviously we know the messiah is Jesus, right? And that, so, but even in the Jewish view, you would think like the Messiah would at least have to be like a rabbi, a prophet, somebody like, but that they, under this Kabbalistic Zionist philosophy, you could have a Messiah that doesn't even believe in God or practice Judaism in any way. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think the Antichrist is going to come here as a world teacher. Like I
yeah,
think for all cultures, all religions.
I think so too. But at the
You know,
same time, I think he's going to emerge from the, um, at least ethnic Jewish tradition because, or background, I should say, because he's going to be accepted by the Jews as a Messiah. And in order for that to happen, he kind of has to check off some boxes of Old Testament prophecy for them. And I think he's going to be able to point back to his
hmm
lineage and say, I come from the tribe of Judah and all this stuff. And that's my personal theory. So, I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it pretty strongly. Um, because I think basically everything that like Jesus actually did fulfill, the Antichrist is going to do a counterfeit fulfillment where there's some elements that also
right.
line up, and then there's some things where it's kind of like, well, that must be pending, and so he's going to mislead a lot of people, a lot of religious Jews in Israel. He's going to mislead on that level because they're going to be like, oh, this is the one that um, Isaiah spoke of, and whatever. So yeah, it's gonna be bad. But okay, so there's a mystic Kabbalah rabbi called Judah Alkali. This guy believed in some really wacky stuff having to do with numerology. I know I have a lot to cover, and I know we're running long-winded, so I won't get into all the details. You can, in my books and in the other video, you could see it. But he believed in a lot of stuff that had to do with numerology, patterns of history, and you have to recognize them. And if you don't, then you get punished. And even like collective punishment of the Jewish people as a race or other people as races. So again, it all fits with this like idea of collective punishment and this like really kind of racist and also just this like sort of sense that God isn't really like moral. And this goes back to like the word of faith thing, right? It's like if I say the wrong thing, if I say I'm sick, he's going to be mad at me. He's going to make me more sick. But if I say that I'm healthy, he's going to heal me. It's like God isn't, in their view, God isn't like moral. It's just like God is like a force and you almost have to trick him into blessing you or you have to crack the code and figure out how to get his blessing out of him. So it's so evil and it's so disconnected from who we know about, what we know about God and who he actually is. Um, and then I also wanted to just kind of touch on one more point with all this because it's very interesting. There was a mystic rabbi in the modern era named Yitzhak Kaduri. And in 1996, when Bibi Netanyahu was in his first prime ministerial election campaign, he distributed amulets to his followers. He got really political. He distributed amulets to his followers, and he said, these amulets obligate you to go vote for Bibi Netanyahu. And that's how he came in. And it was just about the number of amulets that were distributed was like the margin of victory that enabled him to become prime minister for the first time.
Oh, that's
So,
funny.
yeah, just a little fun fact. All right. So, yeah. Oh man. So all right. So just kind of going through this because this is pretty wild. So you've got the symbol, right? The Star of David, so called, which is actually the Seal of Solomon, or I believe the Star of Remphan. So you had the Rothschild family using it. That's a symbol that, like, historically and biblically for a long time was never associated directly with like all Jewish people. They've tried to rebrand it. Like this symbol is like the symbol of the Jewish people, like as a group, but it was really not. There was a push to adopt that symbol. Once again, the Rothschilds were in on that push. Um, they changed their name. They were originally the Bauer family, but they changed their name to Rothschild, which the German is Rothschild, which means red shield in German. Their crest was a red shield, and their door was red as well. On the door of their family home, and before it was even like a broadly accepted Jewish or Zionist symbol, they had a quote unquote Star of David or Seal of Solomon on their door. They also had it on some versions of the family crest, the red shield. They were the number one political and financial patrons of Zionism. The history of the Seal of Solomon, it's a very occult symbol. It is associated with the story that Solomon used it when he was building the temple to summon and employ and bind demons. So it's this symbol that supposedly you're interacting with demons. It gives you power over them. Even more sinister than that, as if that's not bad enough. If you view it as the Star of Remphan, which I do, there's I think that there's a lot of evidence that it is that same symbol. The Bible warns of adopting the Star of Remphan. Remphan is another name for Saturn, who is also another name for Baal and Moloch. It's kind of a confluence across cultures. But the six-pointed star was historically associated with this really demonic worship that included child sacrifice, ritualistic sexual practices, all kinds of depraved stuff. And there's even like a linguistic connection between Saturn or Saturnus and Satan or Satanus. And when you go back a couple levels in Latin, you realize that they probably have a common origin with the history of it. Okay, so I've got a theory about the Israeli flag. This is a little wild, and I'm a little bit speculative. But before I do, I know you know a lot about the stuff I was just talking about. Was there anything that you wanted to kind of interject in there?
Oh, no. I had mentioned something earlier in the show about the star,
Yeah,
but no, go ahead.
yeah. So this is okay. So this is a little bit speculative. All right. So don't take this as absolute fact, but this is what I believe, and it's what I kind of thought about this, and then I was like researching to see if anybody else thought of this, and then lo and behold, of all people, Yasser. Well, actually, this isn't that surprising, but Yasser Arafat, the former leader of Palestine, the PLO guy, he had articulated the same theory in an interview with with Playboy magazine of all places. So not very Muslim,
Jeez.
yeah, but interesting dude. But anyways, he articulated the same theory. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm onto something here. It's not super widespread, but I do believe it myself because it makes sense to me, knowing what I kind of know about this occult background stuff. So I think that the Israeli flag is meant to seal the possession of Greater Israel. All right. So what I see is that the two blue lines symbolize the rivers, the Nile and the Euphrates River, and the presence of the Seal of Solomon in the middle is meant to represent all Jewish dominance in the middle of those two rivers. So in other words, possession of the entire Promised Land territory. And so it's a symbol that I believe is an occult sigil meant to kind of reinforce this this political military agenda of constantly expanding the territory until it engulfs that entire space. Now you may say that's wild, you may throw that out. That's fine. I'm just throwing that out there as a theory. All right. Now, what's indisputable, though, is that there have been some really damaging practical consequences of Kabbalistic Zionism. One is that, like I said, the historic belief in waiting for the Messiah on the part of the Jews, waiting for their Messiah, for Christians, waiting for our Messiah, Jesus, to come back and establish his kingdom, that is thrown out the window in favor of we will, through secular, political, military, violent means, we will take back this promised land all for ourselves. And so that is a direct result of the acceptance on a wide level of Kabbalistic Zionism. Also, Kabbalistic Zionism tempts Christians to have what one Messianic Jew referred to as a mystic fascination with the Jews, again, to idolize them, to essentially treat the Jewish people and to treat the state of Israel as sort of these like living incarnations or vessels for the presence of God or for the fulfillment of prophecy, and then to also scapegoat Arabs. I think that, and particularly in the case of the Palestinians, and I want to be clear, there's been a lot of wrong done on the Palestinian side, so I'm not trying to glorify them. I'm not trying to say that, they're some holy alternative. They're not. And I'm not trying to say that Islam is any better than Judaism or more salvific. It's not, right? All these people need Jesus. But my point is, though, when you dehumanize them and you act like they're disposable, and you basically, especially the Palestinians, you treat them as one big human sacrifice, right? Like, we're going to clear out Gaza. We're going to take over the West Bank, maybe kill them there if they resist. We're going to expand this, greater Israel to that and beyond. We'll talk about what the real borders of it actually are. But you do that and you've essentially offered them up as a sacrifice in service of Zionism, in my view. So it's really evil, wicked stuff. It's something that, like, you don't have to love the Palestinian. I mean, you should love all people and pray for all people, but you don't have to love them politically. But you can't support the wholesale slaughter of a group of human beings. I mean, it's just sick. I mean, you look at, like, Congressman Randy Fine, he made some comments that are really notorious. Someone sent him a picture of a dead Palestinian child. And they said, how do you sleep at night? And he said, like, very easily, thanks for the pic. And then he took it upon himself to post an article about the famine that was being caused in Gaza because Israel was purposely blocking food aid. And it showed, starving people and, including children, everybody else, the elderly. And he posted that article and he said, quote, "starve away." So when you look at that kind of vile, sadistic disregard for the value of human life, in my view, you could only even get there in your mind if you've been influenced by this satanic occult mentality that puts this radical political agenda of greater Israel and Zionism ahead of just basic human decency, and certainly ahead of biblical morality and how we're supposed to treat people in the world. So, it's something I feel very strong about. So I just wanted to really kind of emphasize that.
Yeah.
All right. So the interesting thing is that the British promised to the Palestinians, and when I say Palestinians, what that refers to is the Arab people, and most were Muslim, some were Christians, a small number were Jews, but the Arab people who lived in the territory of historic Palestine, right, or British Mandatory Palestine. The British had promised to them that they would help them to kind of throw the ruling Ottoman Turks off and to establish an independent Arab state in Palestine, but then simultaneously in the 1917 Balfour Declaration, they promised to the Rothschilds and to the other British Zionist activists that they were going to establish an independent Jewish state in that territory, and obviously that's what they went with, right? That became the modern state of Israel. One thing that I want to talk about is that the IDF itself, right, the Israeli Defense Force, has its origins as 4 proto-Israeli terror groups that operated in the area before Israel became a state. All right, so those groups were the Haganah, the Irgun, the Stern, and the Lehi. And those militias were extremely violent, and they performed a lot of extra-legal activity, some against the ruling British colonial powers, ironically. So Menachem Begin, who was the co-founder of the Likud party, which is the current ruling party, Benjamin Netanyahu's party, was also the leader of the Irgun militia group, and he was the one who orchestrated the 1946 terror bombing of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem that killed 91 people. And kind of similarly to the methodology of his eventual successor, Benjamin Netanyahu, he later claimed that he had told everyone to evacuate, kind of tried to spread the word there's going to be a bombing, and people just didn't get the message, kind of like the supposed evacuation orders that went out in Gaza. But at the end of the day, they went ahead, they did the bombing, they didn't care, and they blew up property, which, by the way, they had no right to blow up in the first place, kind of like modern Israel and Lebanon, like we see today, or in Gaza. But they blew it up, and 91 people lost their lives. Then the Haganah group attempted to commit they actually did commit, but they attempted to fully sink a boat that had 1,800 Jews on board. And this was they were European Jews who were attempting to move there, and the British were deporting them. And in protest of that, they just tried to sink the whole boat, regardless of the fact that 1,800 Jews would die. And in the process, about 200 of those people lost their lives, but the rest were actually, ironically, rescued by Palestinian harbor workers. And so they most survived, but that was an attempted plot by a Jewish militia group against Jews. In the 1947 partition plan, which a lot of Christian Zionists love to point back to as a talking point and say, well, the Palestinians have passed up a 2-state solution. They don't want a 2-state solution. That proposal involved 55% of the territory being given to a population of the Jewish population in that area had at that point grown from 7% to 30%, but it was still a minority, even after many European Jews intentionally immigrated there to try to, establish this new Jewish state. The proposal was going to give the 30% minority 55% of the land and pretty much the best parts of the land. And so it was, of course, rejected by the Palestinians, who wanted a more equitable 2-state solution. But that is what the Christian Zionists use as ammunition to say, well, see, the Palestinians don't really want peace with the Israelis. They never have wanted a 2-state solution. They just want to wipe out all the Jews. Highly disingenuous to use that as a talking point if you actually know the history behind it. So continuing on, shortly thereafter, in what's known as the Nakba, or the Great Catastrophe of 1948, 75% of the Muslims and Christians who lived in British Mandatory Palestine were driven out, mostly by those terror militia groups that we talked about. And then the independent state, the quote-unquote Jewish state, although it's actually it's a secular state, they don't have an official religion, the state of Israel was declared in 1948, and then the United States was the first country to recognize it, actually just minutes later, almost as if American intelligence played a role in the whole thing. But anyways, that's what happened. And apparently it was okay for, again, that 10% Christian population even to mostly be driven out. And at the end of the day, the Nakba involved not only extreme violence, the massacres of civilians, including in at least a few cases entire villages of people, but 700, even worse, 750,000 Palestinians were left as refugees. So that was refugee crisis of epic proportions. But again, if you've so idolized, Israel that you don't really care what happens to the Palestinians, you don't see that as a problem. But if you have kind of a broader view of humanity and like humanitarian issues where you're concerned about such things, that's a terrible situation that was created. And then, of course, because those people have attempted to go on and live their lives and have families and move on as best they could, that population has now actually grown to about 6 million Palestinians who are technically in this kind of weird state of limbo where they're refugees, they're not sovereign. Sometimes the other nations won't take them in. They mostly don't want to move into Israel or aren't even allowed to move into Israel. And those who live in Gaza and in the West Bank are under constant oppression, surveillance, checkpointed roads, apartheid, just basically all the symptoms of a brutal military occupation is what they face on a daily basis. And that's been the case for those in Gaza and the West Bank. That has been the case since 1967, when Israel grabbed that land in the Six-Day War, which they actually preemptively started by bombing the Egyptian Air Force, who they supposedly had intel was going to attack them. That's disputed by historians. But they started that war. They went to war with their Arab neighbors. They won, and then they now that they've controlled Gaza and the West Bank for coming up on 60 years since then, and those people are not given sovereignty. They're not given statehood, but they're not given Israeli citizenship. The Israelis can come in and basically do whatever they want to them with little to no consequence. And so the people who live there are just in this constant state of limbo and many in a constant state of fear, I would imagine. And conditions, of course, are whenever Israel decides to kind of tighten the grip on those areas, and they want to restrict food for a while, even before October 7th. In that situation, they had the Gazans on caloric restrictions. They were they were in these kind of like just above starving food rations. They did not even allow some quote unquote luxuries like cinnamon to be imported into the area. Just basically anything to kind of make these people miserable and get them to leave, essentially. The first Israeli prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, actually admitted that the land was stolen. In a moment of rare honesty for an Israeli prime minister, he said that if he was an Arab, he would not want to make peace with Israel, and he didn't blame the Palestinians for being angry and opposed to Israel. So there you go. And anybody who's like kind of in disbelief can look up the quotes. I mean, they're real. Under the occupation, Muslim and Christian Palestinians alike are both oppressed. I kind of hate it when people act like the Christian Palestinians being mistreated is worse than the Muslim Palestinians being mistreated. But I mean, it's all equally bad. But it does add kind of a layer of irony when you consider like the Western Christians' support for the nation of Israel, and then the fact that Christians are living in the minority Christian populations there are living in those same conditions, right? Churches have been intentionally targeted for destruction. I won't go into that many specific examples, but you can look them up. Even a couple of the oldest Christian churches in history were destroyed fairly recently, and it's pretty obvious it was intentional. Gaza, where the genocide has occurred, there were at least 73,000 confirmed fatalities, including 21,000 children. There were at times, intentional cutting off of water, of the power, of food and medicine, shooting people who were attempting to administer aid. Some foreign aid workers have been killed. That's, been underreported in my opinion. 90% of the formerly 2 million person population has now been displaced. Their homes, have largely been leveled, or the areas are so dangerous and cut off from everything that they really just can't live there. In southern Lebanon, where Israel currently decided that it was their right to invade, the fatalities in that, which is supposedly meant to fight Hezbollah, but is clearly a lot broader than that in the scope based on the maneuvers that they've done. They have killed 3,000 people and counting, and over 1 million Lebanese citizens have been displaced from their homes. They decided that they were going to take at least the 10%, the southern 10% of the country, and basically create this quote unquote barrier, this like safety perimeter. And, anybody who lives there just not considered at all as important. So And it's kind of ironic. Again, like I said, it's not worse when they do these things to Christians than when they do them to Muslims. It's equally bad. But it's just so ironic that Christians, so many Christians would support this. In Lebanon, the population of Lebanon is more Christian than Gaza and the West Bank, and in fact, in Lebanon, 1/3 of the country is professing Christian, mostly Orthodox, but Christian nonetheless, and that's been carried out. So, um, all right, so that kind of plays into the Greater Israel Project. Now, I want people to look at a map, right? Like, so you see the map on the left with Israel, and it's in white, and there's that tiny little sliver that is Israel. You see kind of Gaza and the West Bank on the borders of it, but not legally part of it. Compare that to the one on the far right, and you will see that the biblical borders of the Promised Land, if you believe that Israel is still entitled to that, which biblically, if you believe that the church is Israel, as I do, it's going to be the church that is going to eventually inherit that land during the millennial reign of Christ. And so modern secular Israel is not actually entitled to any of it. But even if you believe that, that according to the Bible, they're entitled to it, just look at that map and ask yourself if it's reasonable on a human rights level in the present day without, anything dramatically changing spiritually or, Jesus coming back or anything occurring. Ask yourself if it's really reasonable to think that they should completely devour not only Gaza and the West Bank, but also Lebanon and Jordan. Those would not be countries anymore. And also parts of Syria, Iraq, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia would all be part of it. And if you go read, Genesis 15, the way that the land is mapped out, that's what it would translate to. So a lot of Christian Zionists, I think, aren't even aware that the territory, they think that like modern Israel as its borders stand, like the 1948 or 1967 borders, are actually just like Israel and that's it. And that's what was promised to them, but it's not. It would involve invading all these other countries as well to take that land back. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, in conversation with a man I know you don't care for too much, but regardless, that guy did cajole a little bit of a confession out of him. He said it would be fine if they took it all, in reference to that Genesis 15 complete promised land. And then finally, you can see that picture with soldiers. Not all soldiers. This is not officially issued by the IDF, but many soldiers have taken it upon themselves to affix these, quote, Greater Israel or Eretz Yisrael patches on their uniforms. And you look at that and look at the map to the right of it, and you see that the shape of it is undeniably, that is the shape of Greater Israel. So they're telling you that what they're fighting for is an expanded national Israel. Those particular soldiers are.
Yeah. Now, do you think this is prophetic? What's happening?
I think I hope not, because to be honest, just on a political and emotional and moral level, I don't want to see them succeed. Although I do know that leading up to the end times, there will be a lot of injustice that does appear to temporarily prevail. So I don't know if it's prophetic, but I don't think it is. The reason I allow for the possibility that it could be, but the reason that I don't think it is that I just don't think God is going to honor this. I think that land is for when Christ returns and not before. And the efforts, and we'll talk about this in a couple slides, but the efforts to fulfill prophecy have been so intentional and so violent and just like so calculated that I don't think that God's going to let that be what ushers in the end of the story. I don't think that he's
Well, think of
honored.
it this way.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's prophetic what's happening. I think that when you see the Greater Israel Project, you see the new Gaza plan, that the both are working towards the same goal,
Yeah.
and that's to kind of create, I think, what we may see in Revelation 17, right? The harlot. The
Yeah. With
harlot
the
is a
seven
city,
mountains.
right? On seven hills, seven
On hills.
mountains,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
My thing is it could either be, and I've talked about this with a buddy of mine, John Brisson, but and we've read the documents, YouTube channel. It's a good channel. But he talks about how there's kind of two Babylons that will be set up. There could be one in Gaza and the other one in Jerusalem.
Eh.
Um, and I think when you look at the map, you
Mhm.
look at that territorial perimeter that you
Yeah.
just showed that was on the patch,
Yeah.
that right there,
Uh-huh.
you can see that that kind of lines up similarly to the jurisdiction that Babylon had over
Uh,
the area,
yeah.
in the
Yeah, I think
past.
you mentioned that, yeah.
So what I'm saying is I think this is prophetic, and I think it's
Yeah.
something that we don't want it to become, Revelation 17, and is this
Right.
the
Yeah.
location? Is this what's going down?
Yeah.
But it kinda just it has to happen,
Yeah.
it's gotta be played out
Well,
in
and
order for the Lord to come back.
that very well may be. And but my whole kind of thing on it is I I don't think as Christians, and I know you agree with me on this, we don't need to like try to make prophecy happen. So like I feel like a lot of
Right,
Christians are
right,
like,
right,
well,
right.
if it's gonna happen, therefore it's supposed to happen. And you could go around with how God uses evil for good, and good and evil things feed into the larger plan. So I don't know that necessarily, that because even if it's going to happen or it's quote supposed to happen, that doesn't mean that like it's a positive moral thing as it's happening. But it's maybe inevitable, but
Right, right.
and allowed under the
And
sovereignty
that's
of
that's
God.
what they're trying to do, right? Like the NAR movement trying to
Yeah.
establish heaven here on earth. Like this is
Yeah.
all them trying to do that will of God. They think
Yeah.
that they are God here in some sort of way, and they're progressing towards dominionism
Yeah.
of Christian authority, like on that side, right? Like on the NAR side. But again,
Yeah.
I think everything's going to come together in like a new age religion. It's just all going to clash together. It's going to fit together so tightly
Yeah.
because that's how each and every one of them were set up. All these religions are all set up to merge together at one time in
Yeah.
that end time, you know?
Yeah, and it's all gonna and ideas, it's all gonna be centered in that geographical area, and yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the thing is, though, it's like to me, I'm like, even if that's all the case, and it very well could be. I mean, I'm not saying I have like an alternate interpretation of prophecy that would explain things and not have that be the case. But my whole thing is, it's like along the way, we shouldn't be getting on board with like the evil elements of it just to make that happen. Like, oh, it's supposed to
Right.
happen, so let's like speed it along a little bit and do whatever we need to do along the way.
Right. Right.
Um, Maybe it's inevitable, and like I said, on a human level, and I know ultimately God's on the throne and everything's going to work out in the end. There's going to be justice in the end, but on a human level, I'm like, I don't really want to see them succeed with any of this. But yeah, I mean, no, I know that like eventually things are going to get really bad before they get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
I
that's
know.
that's fair, But I just wanted to point out though, for people who are like actively supporting it or who think that like it seems like biblical or like comparing it to like the Old Testament, conquest of Canaan. Um, there's some big problems with that. Like, first of all, obviously, like I said, like the human rights, the sovereign territories, you'd have to basically not care in the surrounding areas. And then beyond that, that land cannot be biblically apportioned to the quote unquote Israel, the Jewish people, because in the Bible it was given according to the 12 tribes and certain areas where those tribes were supposed to dwell, right? Like in the kingdom of Israel. And today, most Jews do not know which of the 12 tribes they are even descended from. And I'm sure in a modern sense, the borders of those segments have gotten confused, and people are so well established in Israel as it exists that I really don't think like even if someone could come along and say, well, I'm from Benjamin and you're from Levi, so you gotta get out of here, this is supposed to be my house, and basically do what they've done to the Palestinians. I don't think that like even like the Israelis would go along with that with each other, because I mean they have their own sense of private property and justice within Israel. So it's the whole thing is just like silly,
I
honestly.
almost wonder if like the peace agreement that the Antichrist makes, if it destroys all nationalism,
Maybe.
where it's more like the the borders come down everywhere,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you
I guess
know,
yeah, one
because
one
of
world government. I mean, by
that
definition, yeah,
peace deal with Israel and the Middle East and all
yeah,
this kind of stuff. You've got
yeah,
the two worst enemies of history.
yeah. I guess
If they come to peace and love,
yeah.
then the whole world will kind of
Yeah, I guess what I'm
fall
just
with it.
kind of like responding to is like the Christian Zionist type rhetoric around it, because it's like they're acting like they're trying to restore it to a state of like biblical, almost like Old Testament biblical grandeur. And it's like, that's literally not possible. The only thing that you may be doing as far as fulfilling prophecy is like ushering in, like you said, this like kind of like scene for like the Antichrist and this like one world reality. But it's like, we're not supposed to get on board with that. Like, it's going to happen, but we're not supposed to be like the minions of it. So it's like to be trying to
And that's all
facilitate.
part of that falling away process,
It really is. Yeah.
Right.
And I think like the idol that, I can't remember if he said it directly or not, or if I just inferred it, but I was listening to, when you had, Tishbite on one of the episodes, and it was something he said that kind of triggered me to think maybe like Israel is like the kind of idol, the catalyst, and Christian Zionism is the catalyst for the falling away of the church. Um, and maybe they'll win, maybe temporarily. Maybe this will all succeed, but I'm not going to let it without a fight, and I'm not anybody
Sure.
by myself to stop it. But I mean, many of us united, but um, but the thing is like. And I mean, on a political level, with regards to this issue, I don't mean like unite all the religions. Like, no, please don't come for me in the chat and say he's advocating for it. No, that's not what I meant. Like, I'm more political. Like, Stephen's the more esoteric. Although I got into the weird stuff with the Kabbalah, and it was also satanic. I was really glad to hop back out of it. But yeah, no, honestly, like. It's just like I don't want to be part of that, and I don't think as Christians we should be part of it, even if it's going to happen. So that's where, even if resistance is like temporarily futile, I think we should still resist.
Right.
That's kind of
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to point out a couple things, and I'm going to try to whip through some of this stuff. But the Likud
Well,
party,
how much? I tell you what. Let's get through the Greater Israel Project stuff,
yeah,
and if we could, we'll do a part 3. We'll get you back on. We'll finish the rest of it,
okay,
another time.
yeah,
And yeah, we'll move through it like that.
okay,
Since
cool,
the episode has been great, and we had a couple of technical
technical
difficulties, but
issues, yeah,
we got right around those.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool. It'll be cool to do a part 3.
All right, sweet. Okay, well, yeah. So as far as the Greater Israel goes, the Likud Party Charter of 1977, which again, think back to the Irgun, the blowing up of the hotel, the driving out of people from their homes, right? So terrorist organization, uh, acting like a terrorist organization even when they're in political power, like what we see now in Gaza, the West Bank, and southern Lebanon. Their charter, when they were founded in 1977, their charter said, between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Now, what does that sound like? That sounds like the Palestinian slogan that they chant, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, right? Between the sea and the Jordan, the river and the Jordan River, the river and the sea, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. All right. So that's just an example of the double standard of Christian Zionism, because Christian Zionists love to point to that from the river to the sea chant, which, to be honest, I don't love it either. I think it kind of implies a call to violence myself. I wouldn't personally want to use that, even though I'm more on the Palestinian side. But they say that is like, oh, they're calling for genocide. They're saying they want to wipe out all the Jews from the river to the sea. Now, I don't know that that's what everybody who says that means. I don't think it is. But regardless, my point is there is a linguistic exact equivalent, but for the side of the Israelis, that's in the Likud Party Charter, and you don't ever hear any Christian Zionists denouncing that. And maybe they don't know about it. But you don't ever hear them saying, well, also between the sea and the Jordan, that the Israelis say that's wrong too, even though they're talking about the same two bodies of water and saying the same sentiment, right? Only our national sovereignty between those borders. So therefore, the ethnic cleansing and the expansion that we see, from in the present day, right, in Gaza, and then the occupying of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, that's all codified in their document. Like they tell you, like, our goal is to make that all part of Israel. So they were never intending to, like, we'll occupy it and then we'll give it up but when it's safe or whatever. They have kind of temporarily done that under political pressure and then gone back and taken it back like multiple times. But it's a game. You look at the party charter, and at least there's more, I guess you could say, quote unquote, progressive politicians and people within Israel who don't support that, and maybe they are sincere. But you look at like the Likud party that's dominating, you look at like the Netanyahu agenda, it is officially part of their policy to keep all that land and make that part of Israel. So for people to say, well, they're just doing it for safety because they can't let it go because there's these crazy terrorists who never mind that, it was only terror that established modern Israel in the first place. But these Palestinians, they're, the descendants of people who were driven out of their homes, they're crazy terrorists and they're trying to kill them. So they can't let it go for safety reasons. My point is, it's calculated either way. They're like, no, that's ours. We're hanging on to it. So it's like Christians should be aware of that. And again, a lot of these greater Israel people support that. So they're like, yeah, it's great. It's theirs. It belongs to them. It's the Bible. But ask yourself, though, do you apply the same logic to all those other sovereign countries that are also part of the promised land? Because if you do, they're not nearly done. You're going to have to support like an unprecedentedly bloody and complicated regional war in order for Israel to recapture all of its biblical promised land territory, which, according to a covenant theology understanding, they are not even entitled to in the present day. The only understanding that makes you think that that land belongs to quote unquote Israel or the Jews instead of the Christian church comes from dispensationalism, which is a invention of the 19th century. So people really need to just be aware of how all these things connect and really then decide what they support. Maybe at the end of the day, for whatever reason, they still support it. I mean, okay, I can't do anything about that, but like, I want to just inform people so they really know where it all came from,
Right on. Yeah.
John Hagee, I kind of alluded to this earlier. His Christians United for Israel organization funds settlements in the West Bank, which are illegal under international law. And there have been numerous incidents of settler violence. If you read about the so-called Hilltop Youth, right? And these people who go down and they like literally terrorize, sometimes kill Palestinians who live around their illegally built houses and compounds. And basically the idea is to like drive them out of the land and then you can keep expanding the neighborhoods. Basically the Israeli MO in Gaza and the West Bank and probably in southern Lebanon to come has been like make the Arabs who live there as miserable as possible so they will either die or leave and then we'll make it part of Israel. And that's basically the goal. According to John Piper, the theologian, and he's Reformed Baptist, he's Calvinist, so I don't agree with him on that and, a few other things, but I do agree with him because he's got a really good essay in which he kind of scripturally lays out that Israel, according to the covenant theology framework, has no present divine right to any of that land. So anything that you're supporting Israel doing to get that land, if you're a Christian Zionist, you're not supporting what's like biblically, morally justified. You may think it's necessary to happen, but the same, morality, human rights rules that apply to the rest of us apply to national Israel as well in their unbelief. And so it's not, God's work to be driving people out of Gaza or the West Bank or to be, capturing parts of Lebanon, at least according to my understanding, So if you're supporting that, I guess you're just supporting an aggressive political military agenda. You want this, secular foreign country to have all this land. You think that that's great, but don't put the Bible in it. Don't say that, well, that's because the Bible says that they deserve it right now or they're entitled to it right now. Because it just doesn't say that. And then finally, I'd like to point out, even if you are a Christian Zionist, and even if you do hold to the idea that the promise made to Israel includes all that land, I mean, reference back to Leviticus 18:28, it said, if you make the land unclean, it will vomit you out, just as it is vomiting out the nation that was there before you. So, Israel has been disbanded, right, multiple times. Like, they were driven out into exile in Babylon, and then they came back, they rebuilt, and then in 70 AD, the second temple was destroyed. They were driven out again. Who's to say that that couldn't happen again if God decides he's just had enough and he's going to do another judgment on Israel? And I'm not even rooting for that to happen, honestly, because like I just want at this point, like 1948 Israel, I think they're there to stay. I think that, there are good people there. I just want them to stop. I just want it to, and I want Christians, more importantly, because Christians who need to and should know better, I just want them to stop supporting all this violence because whenever there's a judgment, whenever people are driven out, innocent people are going to die. And I just don't want us as a church to be part of that agenda, so that's really where my heart is on it. and then I think I had that would be for part 3. That was the conclusion of Greater Israel. But yeah, basically that's, it's just on my heart that, like, as Christians, I just think we've got to be really careful about what we're supporting, and just kind of realize that, like, a lot of the things that we're told are spiritual requirements of us are not. They are someone else's political agenda, and our religion, our faith in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ has been co-opted to support a political agenda that has often manifested in ways that are downright evil. So I think we need to be aware of that, and we should resist it. I don't think we need to get on board with that. So that's where I stand on all that, and I guess that probably is a really good place to leave it.
Yeah, no, Jared, man, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your work, appreciate the time you put into all of this kind of stuff. Um, I'm excited to get you back on again. I really would love to get you on like a round table with some other guys that
Oh,
have,
that'd be great.
you know,
Yeah,
dug into
yeah,
similar topic, geopolitics and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, for the audience, man, where can they check out your work and support you and all this kind of
yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, so again, my books are on Amazon. I've got a book called The Idolatry of Christian Zionism, and then a second one called Hijacked by Zionism. And so if you go there, you can pick those up there. If you want to see my comprehensive sort of lecture video, where I kind of I kind of lay all this out in like a PowerPoint presentation, if you go to Rumble and look up my video, it's called Zionism and the American Christian. And then you can access all that information there. And it's kind of funny because I've got I've got only 3 reviews. So if you like my book, please leave it a good review. I've only got 3 reviews. One of them was a 1-star review which tanked the rating, and it was some guy who said anti-Semitic, and that was all he said. So that's, typical Zionist fashion of not addressing the facts. And if you remember my first episode here, and I basically go through the same process in the book, I bend over backwards to explain why, anti-Zionism is not the same as anti-Semitism, but people don't care. So, but anyways, that's that. So you could find me on Amazon. You could find the Rumble video, and then yeah, I'll be eager to come back for part 3 and whatever else, and dig
Yeah,
into it
man.
more. So
Yeah, I'm excited for you. You started a channel, right? And just put
yeah,
work into it, man.
yeah,
It'll leave an expression of who you are and what
yeah.
you like to talk about. So
Yeah, and
that's cool.
I may do other topics on there too. I don't want to be I mean, I think this is like hugely important, especially just for the character of the American Christian church, but like I don't want to just be always harping on this. I mean, I have other things I want to talk about too. So, yeah, I might do a diversity of videos on there. So, we'll see.
Nice, nice, man. All right, man. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited to get you back on in the future. We'll set that up. But folks, listen, hey, if you're still with us, appreciate you. If you want to support the show, support the work that I put in here, just head on over to patreon.com/the biblical hitman. You can get all of your ad free and community chats over there. And then also come support the channel over on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, like the show, and share it with your friends. Drop a comment down below about your thoughts about the episode. Right, we're that's one of the best places me and the guests can interact with the audience. And don't forget to come support the channel over on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Spreaker. Any of the audio platforms will do. If you like the show, just leave a nice review and hit that follow button. But with all that said, Jared, thank you again, man.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, man, we'll have you on again soon. But
All
thank you,
right.
everybody. Have a good night. See ya.